Welcome everybody to TAG Data Science and Analytics for Good initiative event about data science superpowers for good. Super excited to see so many three-dimensional people. And I told Shannon earlier, I woke up and I was like, oh, I have to actually wear grown-up clothes. All I have are golf and pickleball clothes. My feet are not used to being outside of tennis shoes. So good to see everybody in person. Those of y'all that are virtual, welcome as well. Thank you. I'm sorry that you couldn't be here, but I'm glad that you're here virtually. We are going to have an option for you to ask questions. Are you going to talk about that? Yeah. And Shannon will share with you about how to do that. It's a little old school, but it'll work out just fine. For those of you that are in person, make sure you have your questions ready for us, because we do want this to be an interactive type of session. All right. Shannon Harlow is someone that I've known for almost a decade. She's an incredible leader. She serves as a senior director at Cox Automotive, running their data science and analytics programs, and she's just a freaking rock star. She's also been really heavily involved with other nonprofit initiatives, and her company has a passion for giving back to the community where they allow volunteer time off. So thank you, Shannon, for being a board member and for opening our event.
Thank you for having me. Today is our first hybrid event, and just so you know, if you're in person, it's microphone the entire room. So if we cough, stand up, get food, etc., it will get picked up on the mic. So just appreciate your help today. But yes, welcome to our TAG Data for Good event. For those of you that are online, we are having some technical difficulties on chat. So with the circle of trust, I am going to be giving you my cell phone number. And after the intro, during the panel discussion, you can text me and we'll be sure to have your questions answered. But again, circle of trust, please do not pass it along to everybody. My phone number is 404-423-8848. And we'll be sure to get those answered. But it's just a pleasure to be here with you today. In this room, we have members of TAG, we have our members of Enduring Hearts nonprofit, we have numerous volunteers, and just a lot of great business and data science advocates in the Atlanta community. For our agenda, let me make sure that, I think we lost the, somebody have the clicker? There you go. Oh, okay, perfect. So for our agenda, we're going to talk a little bit more about the partners that we're working with, both our sponsor as well as our nonprofit partner. We're also going to have a special panel presentation where the folks that worked closely on our Data for Good initiative with Enduring Hearts are going to talk in depth about the project, how they set it up, the approach, and the results. So if we go to the next slide, want to thank our sponsor, Relation AI. This event is possible because of them. And if you don't know of Relation AI, you should. They're the world's fastest, most scalable relational knowledge graph management system. And we also are fortunate to share that they received Gartner's Cool Vendor Award in 2022. And we have Derek Johnson, their VP of Applied Artificial Intelligence, with us today to share a little bit more about what they do.
It's fun to be in front of people again. This is, just really quickly, thanks for allowing us to sponsor this event, and we're really excited to be here. A lot of familiar faces. And just at a super high level, I'll give you a 1-minute overview of who we are. So at Relational AI, we're focused on helping companies build intelligent data apps on top of knowledge graphs. So for those of you who are not familiar with knowledge graphs, you interact with them every day. If you're doing a Google search, you interact with knowledge graph, you can talk to Siri. Essentially, a knowledge graph allows you to preserve relationships between your data elements so that you can build smarter, more efficient, and powerful data apps. So our mission is to make that type of infrastructure available to everybody. We've far along, we're 150 people deep. We're going pretty fast. A couple of my colleagues are here, Nick and Ben. So Nick is probably one of the smartest data scientists on earth. I'm just going to put it out there. And we're super excited to be here again. And this mission of this organization is near to our heart. We did some work with the UN recently where we modeled network resiliency for developing countries. So how quickly can you predict what would happen if a flood came? What would happen if some kind of major disturbance came? So our platform is built for things like that. How do you model and simulate what can happen? So anyway, happy to share more with time. I think I did my 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. We'll go to the next slide. So, as you know, this is Data for Good, and you may ask, what it is that we do in our mission. So our mission is really to elevate data science, stimulate innovation, and encourage collaboration to do as much good as possible. And we do that through a variety of events. We have learning series, we have our Analytics Innovation Awards, which are coming up on November 17th, and a variety of other events, but most importantly, the one you're here to talk to us about today, which is the Data for Good project. And then in terms of the Data for Good initiative, we do about 1 to 2 projects a year. They're mostly project-based, and they really focus on either a business outcome or a cause-based project. And so, for this current one, we are working with Enduring Hearts. And I met Ruth Midlampus back when we worked with Equifax. We've known each other for about 7 years. And so Ruthie reached out and said, Shannon, I know you and Beverly are doing a lot of work for the Data for Good. She told me a lot about Enduring Hearts and all the wonderful work you guys are doing. And, we really thought it was a great opportunity to really partner together and do some great work. So let me bring Ruth up to tell you a little bit more about Enduring Hearts.
Shannon. And so I got, the office closed, but I didn't quite make it on the shoe wear. I'm working from home, and my day job is with a high growth fintech. But back when I was at Equifax and found myself very much in that corporate world and found a lot of efficiencies and ability to do things within a corporate world, it still felt a bit cold. And so I was looking for a way to give back and a way to get involved. And fortunately, I knew Carolyn Salvador, who is the CEO of Enduring Hearts. Our mission is to fund research for kids who have had a heart transplant. And that's a space where the big pharmaceutical companies and the biotechs don't always see. It's an underserved population where many people don't realize when a child gets a heart transplant, on average, when we began about 10 years ago, the average heart lasted 12 years. So if you think about your kid, if you've ever had to take your kid to a children's hospital, if you've ever had an issue with your child, how impactful that is to you as a family. Imagine going through heart failure, getting on that list, trying to get a transplant, getting all the way through that process, and then understanding that the heart may not last into adulthood. And so our founder, who initially came from private equity space, addressed it in a very technology way. We really line up with a lot of startups. He said we need innovation and we need to fund innovation. And so that's what Enduring Hearts does. And so we've got a strong scientific advisory board that looks at different research that can be funded through hospitals and universities across the country. And we've got some really cool events that have been developed over the last 10 years. We got a bourbon gala that's pretty well known throughout the Southeast that brings us a lot of dollars and lets us invest in development research. And we've got partnerships with the American Heart Association and heart and lung transplant internationally with different groups. But the opportunity to work with you guys and Data for Good to really understand our population of donors and what the potential there was just huge. And so when we got started, we went 2 different routes. We could look at an operational project, or we could look at one closer to the science. But because the charity is really just like a startup hitting that growth mode, we've got new employees, new marketing leadership. We've got folks who know operationally what we can do. We felt like the more important thing to do was to dig in with you guys and to understand what's going on with our donor population, who have we not tapped and who should we be tapping, and to bring more funds into the organization. So I've just been so impressed with the energy and the knowledge from everybody within this group. And I just think you guys will build this to be one of the strongest elements of TAG. I'm so excited to see what you've done and so grateful for all the time and energy you've all given to Enduring Hearts. It's really incredible. So thank you.
Thank you. And Ruth serves as the president of the board for Enduring Hearts, and her day job is the vice president of project management at BuildGo. So thank you, Ruth. Well, now we get to introduce the actual panel portion today, and we're going to have Beverly Wright, PhD, to host our panel portion. And Beverly is both the head of the data science solution at Birchworks and the board chair for TAG, Data and Analytics Society. And I can't think of a person who's done more for the Atlanta data science analytics community, as well as Data for Good in general. And thank you so much for Beverly for bringing us all together and walking us through the discussion today.
And appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in, guys. The next section that we're going to talk about is we're going to cover the results of the actual work. And we have more to cover with you guys privately later, but we want to at least do the big strokes so that the group can better understand how to leverage data science for good. So the problem statement is, oops, I'm not in camera. There we go. Oh, and by the way, if you're speaking, try to get close to the owl. The people online were saying they're having a hard time. So the problem statement that we were looking at with Enduring Hearts is to help their funding model. There's one particular thing you can get to Enduring Hearts if you're just a friend of the founders, and those people are writing big checks. But what they're really looking for to maintain 501c3 status is they need lots of people giving more. And by the way, this is not a call to get you to this is just explaining the business problem. I just realized how that sounded. But if you want to, no, okay. So anyway, that was our objective, is we really need to understand the funding model and how people are donating, why they're donating, how they're donating, all that kind of stuff. So the first thing we did, now this is a best practices that I've used with my students over the past 20-something years that I've been a professor, as well as my teams that I lead through consulting engagements and when I'm working for companies. And they get mad at me. They always think it's such a terrible, burden, but it's really useful. And that first step is to conduct some research. So we actually hit Google Scholar. Now, technically we went to the University of South Carolina because I had access still, but we hit Google Scholar and doing an academic study just to at least see what's the terminology that's used when you're talking about donating to a nonprofit. What are the other kinds of models that are already out there? What's already been proven? I hate to say it, I know that y'all are mostly practitioners. I love you all. Most of what we study has already been done on the academic side. It hasn't gotten applied, but it's been at least researched. So that's why it's beneficial to take a look at what's already been done. Without going through a lot of the detail, these were our top 3 articles. Understanding Alumni Giving, Theory and Predictors of Donor Status. Okay, not exactly the same, but at least we can understand donations, period. Understanding Donor Behavior, a classification paradigm. Now we're getting a little closer. And then understanding online donor behavior, the role of donor characteristics, perceptions of the internet, website, etc., its influence of social networks. So these were just background to help us at least frame some kind of business problem to say, okay, well, we know it has something to do with donors, but how do we structure that model? What kind of variables do we pull in? What do those features look like, etc. And we came up with this very kind of crude looking hypothesized model where we're evaluating some sort of donation level. Maybe it's frequency, maybe it's in tiers, maybe it's a dollar amount, maybe it's a proportion of how much money is in the household. This is still a little nebulous, but some sort of donation amount. And then we bucketed it into 3 main categories: socioeconomics that are completely out of the organization's control, the relationship with Enduring Hearts, and then the donor characteristics. So these each represent lots of variables, but at least this gave us a conceptual model. And we felt like the entire model would be moderated. In other words, it would vary based on donor segments. So we have that box up there. That's called a moderator, if you're ever curious. Happy to tell you what a mediator is too, if you're interested. But anyway, these 3 big buckets of types of variables drove how someone donates according to the academic literature based on other studies that have been done. So we took that kind of as our first broad framework to say, okay, well, how do we approach this specific kind of question? All right. So then we knew what kind of data we wanted, and I'm going to let Matt, because he was responsible for most of the data engineering, I'm going to let Matt talk about the data engineering portion.
This will be very brief. Like to go back one slide.
Oh, yes, sir.
Sorry. John Hawkins, one of the board members, was able to get us an extract out of Salesforce, which helped greatly and steer us to the right tables to focus on so that we weren't combing the 335 tables out of the Salesforce data model that would have probably eaten up a lot of time and produced nothing. So from that, we did a little bit of cleanup. Ironically, the greatest time-consuming portion of this was going and pulling data from the U.S. Census Bureau to try to enrich the data and figure out what the average household income is, the zip code level, and other things like that. We did take an initiative to geocode the addresses that were geocodable that we might use in phase 2, if and when that goes anywhere. And then, Beverly, if you advance the slide. And then thanks to Ray Ty, who spent numerous hours with me sitting down and walking me through how she pulled data from all these other applications and how it flowed from those applications into Salesforce, how data got tagged inside of Salesforce so that we could then later make sense. Again, what made this tricky on the back end, in my opinion, and the other folks will sort of have their add to it, is everybody donated in multiple avenues. So trying to just say, hey, this is Matt, and he just gives all the money at the whiskey tasting event isn't true, because Matt could donate down all channels. And so you say, well, who is Matt? But that pretty much summarizes the extent. Again, there was probably more time spent playing and trying to understand the data than I would have expected on the front end, but that's the way these data science projects go. So
yes.
There you have it.
Those of you that, thank you, Matt. Those of you that are in data science and do the actual work, you know that 80% of the work is done just trying to get the data to a point where you can work with it. So the next thing I'll talk about is once we got our data straight, we had several things that we did, okay? And now this is going to look like a daunting list, but I wanted to kind of document everything we did. Oops, wrong way. The first thing we did was we spent several hours. By the way, did I mention that these are all volunteers? Everybody's a volunteer on the For Good initiative. So we have no paid staff. These are all 100% volunteers, and you'll get to meet them on the panel. But we spent several hours doing some EDA, exploratory data analysis, just trying to figure out what the data looks like in general. So that was a good starting point. Perrin did a lot of that work, and I just did some work just to figure out, what is the basic structure of the data? What's the basis? The second big thing we did was we determined the segments. And more specifically, we applied cluster analysis to determine our segments. I actually did some of this. I used centroid cluster to determine how many clusters. And then I used k-means cluster, especially because that's an easier method to explain. Like if you were to go to your board and say they use k-mean cluster, they go, oh, okay, we know what that is. But centroid, they might not like that. So I used centroid to figure out the Ks, and then I used k-mean cluster. And that gave us the results to understand who has donated, which Jess is going to walk through the results of that in just a minute. The third big chunk was we wanted to figure out not just the who, but what drove people to donate. So yeah, who's donating what, but also what are the features or the factors or the concepts or the things that drove people to donate. Quick example, if you are female as opposed to male, you're more likely to donate to breast cancer causes. I'm making that up, but that's what I mean by a driver. That's different than the segmentation or the clusters, which is more about the who. The driver analysis is more about the what. What are the factors that encourage someone to give? And so I'll go through the results of that after Jess talks about the segments. And then the last thing that we did was each of these model attributes were confirmed with a bivariate correlation. So for those of y'all that are actually doing data science in your jobs, you can't just like trust a model. You know what I'm saying? You got to confirm that sucker. So there was a lot of confirming and slicing other ways and dicing this way and turning it upside down and looking at it differently. Our main tools, Excel, Python, Tableau, Power BI, and SAS Enterprise Guide. Okay, so that's how we analyze the data. Next, I'm going to ask Jess to talk about the descriptives from the EDA, and then she's also going to cover the cluster. Come on, Jess.
All right, so this, can we get on camera?
Yeah, you can see it. You can see it in the front too.
Oh, okay. I can't read that, it's too small.
Oh yeah, true.
Okay, so this is just the overall donor population. So you can see that it's pretty split, male versus female, and there's about 2,000 donors, and they have contributed almost $3 million of the last 3 years. And that has been split out into 5,544 donations. So the average tenure with Enduring Hearts is 0.8 years. So that means out of all the donors, the average relationship they have with Enduring Hearts is 0.8 years. And you can also see that the majority of the donors have only donated once before, and not as many have donated more times. So the top donation channels are through the website, events, and Facebook. Anything else with that? Okay. So you can also see the average donation levels for all of these donors. So most of the donors are in the less than $100 annually or the $100 to $500 annually level. So there's still very few donors that are donating those big amounts, like $5,000 to $10,000 a year. Most of them are kind of only donating a few $100s a year. So now we're going to jump into the clusters. We were able to identify 3 significant clusters. And the first one are the Enduring Elites. So the Enduring Elites are mostly male, 81% male. And it's a very exclusive elite group. Only 21 donors made it into this group. And even though there's only 21 donors in this group, they have had a really big impact. So they have donated almost $400,000 over the past 3 years. And that's a lot for 21 donors to contribute. And most of them have a little bit of a tenure built up with Enduring Hearts. So their average years of relationship with Enduring Hearts is 2.5 years. Another really important thing to note here is that none of these donors have only donated one time. All of these donors have a really high dedication level to Enduring Hearts, and all of them have donated multiple times over the last 3 years. And then looking at the average annual donation level, so all of these guys have donated at least 500 and many into the thousands every single year. So we actually have 6 of these donors that have donated $10,000 plus on average over the last few years. So that's definitely a lot of money. And the top donation channels for them are through events and bank account. So I know someone before mentioned the whiskey tastings and the golf tournaments. So these guys really love the whiskey events, and that contributes to a lot of the donations for them. So the second significant cluster are the dedicated donors. There are 87 donors in this category. And just like the Enduring Elites, they are mostly male, and they have contributed $650,000 over the last 3 years. So something interesting to note is they have a 2.6-year tenure with Enduring Hearts. So that is extremely close to the Enduring Elites. So they've been around just about the same amount of time as the Enduring Elites, but they just aren't quite to the same dedication level as the Enduring Elites are. So they don't really have much of a trend as far as the number of donations per year. So over the last 3 years. So they don't have a trend on the number of donations, but they're still donating a fairly high amount per year, but they're not donating at the higher annual levels like the Enduring Elites are. So they're still very dedicated donors. They're just not donating quite as much an amount as the Enduring Elites are. And they're donating mostly through events and unknown sources. And the third significant cluster, this one is the most distinct from the first two. So for the first time, we see the donors are pretty split by gender. So it's pretty split between male and female. And that's very different from the first 2 clusters that we saw. And this is where the majority of the donors are. There are about 1,800 donors in this cluster, and they have contributed about $650,000 over the last 3 years. So there's a lot of donors in this category, but they're not necessarily donating in high amounts. They also have a very short tenure with Enduring Hearts. So the average tenure for this group is 0.7 years. And as you can see at the bottom, most of these donors have only donated once. So there are a few that have donated multiple times, but a lot of them just donate once, maybe on the website, maybe at an event, a lot of them through Facebook. So they donate once and kind of disappear. So there's a lot of opportunity here to get these guys to donate higher amounts and more frequently. And you can see this is the only cluster that has a lot of donors in the lower amount categories annually. The first two segments had all of their donors in the higher annual amounts, and this one has most of the donors in the lower annual amounts.
Great. Thank you. And we're going to take questions. So again, I already have one question for Jess. So we're going to take questions here in just a second. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about the predictive model, because again, we felt like knowing who, I mean, hopefully that's insightful to understand the who, but also to understand the what, because we want to get a different perspective on that. So the first question, when you're thinking about a model, and again, those of y'all that are data scientists, you'll know what I'm talking about. You think about this hypothesized model. The first question is, well, how do we measure donation level? Like, what is that even? You know, what are our response metrics? What's our why? And so that was my first task was, okay, let's figure this out. And so we did a factor analysis PCA. I tried both because I like to do that, to look at the amount they donated, the number of donations, the interval between the donations. We had a very limited amount of data. If we had a lot more, we could have put all that in there. But what I was trying to see is, do they behave from a mathematical standpoint? Do these variables behave different enough to be considered different? Or are they essentially doing the same thing? Okay, so a quick example, if you have square footage, number of bedrooms, and I don't know, some other size thing for a house, those are all size. They're probably going to converge on one factor. They're just going to be one thing. It's going to represent size. So I was trying to figure out mathematically if the amount donated, the number of donations, and the interval between donations were about the same mathematically, or if they looked distinctly different. And as it turned out, they looked different. The first two, amount donated and number of donations, behaved similarly. Mathematically, they moved about the same way. So it's okay to kind of group those together or take one versus the other, because then your next question is, well, how do you handle that? So that's one cluster. Well, I'm not going to use that word. That's one factor or component. The other one was the temporal-based metric, which had to do with the interval in between the time since they last donated. So that came out as completely different. So what that tells me is, if you're going to run a model to help explain or predict donations, know that the amount donated, number of donations are essentially acting similarly. Whereas anything that's temporal based, like how frequently or how long in between, those are going to be they're going to be different. So don't try to throw them into the same model, right? So that's what it told me. So then I said, okay, well, now we got to figure out what our why is. We ended up going with the amount they donated, and we looked at it from two different slices. And I actually found this really fascinating, but y'all know I'm a nerd, so whatever. But the two slices that we evaluated were raw amount that they donated and amount as a percentage of their household income. Now, I totally was thinking that this would be different. I thought someone with donating $100 if you make $100,000 is different than donating $100 if you make $100. I thought that there would be a big difference. Shockingly to me, there was no real difference in how the models produced. So they ended up producing approximately the same metrics. So I thought that was really interesting. So first off, I looked at the clusters all together, and then you'll see we did some divisions here. Looking at all the clusters together, the drivers of their donation behaviors, considering amount or amount as a proportion, because it came out about the same, there were the following drivers. Number one, the donation path. The top donation paths, bank draft was huge. These are in order of importance in case y'all want to know. Bank draft and employer deduction. Other social media, Facebook and website, yeah, that's cool too. They are all significant. But the bank draft and the employer deduction were like top notch. I can relate to that. Just like, set it and forget it. Also, the second big thing was the relationship with the organization. Having a close relationship drove their donation, which we already kind of knew that. So it kind of confirmed that. And then thirdly, the giving interval and the number of donations. And I'm trying to think if these are, I think one of these was negative. It's probably the interval. So the size of the interval. So what you want is people giving more frequently, even if it's a smaller amount, because they stay connected to you and they're remembering and they're thinking about you. So the interval and the number of donations that they've given. Okay, well, it was very suspect to me that some things were missing from our original model. Remember, we talked about the socioeconomic factors and the demographics and all that. Where are the demographics? They're not in here. They didn't come up significant. I was a little surprised by that. Now, it could be that your group is fairly homogenous, like pretty much they're all rich males or something. I don't know, but I don't think so. I mean, so things like, okay, well, that might be why, because things like career, age, income, gender, and for this part, events didn't seem to matter. Those were not strong drivers of when someone opened their wallet to Enduring Hearts. Those particular things, when you look at everybody together. Now, you'll see when you break it up differently, it does start to matter, okay? All right, so I broke it up by relationship, yes, no, meaning do they have a close relationship with the founders of Enduring Hearts or not? And I looked at it by Jess's clusters, the dedicated dabblers, the social dabblers, and the enduring elites. I probably should have put those in the same order as yours. Sorry about that, Jess. And I highlighted a few things. You guys can, we can work with you guys to help digest this a little bit better. But a couple of things I wanted to point out that stood out were on those that said yes to a close relationship or that were indicated as yes. The number of donations and the social media were the only two things that really came out. Probably because you see that everybody else has a long list of things, all the other groups that drove their donation. They only have one real thing, the relationship. That's it. So that's why there's only like number of donations, social media. I don't even take them that seriously. They were significant, but you only have two items that came out of a list of all those items we threw in there. It's pretty impressive. So it's a strong relationship. The clusters, I bolded a couple of things that I thought popped a little. When you look at the dedicated dabblers, suddenly career matters. So I'm not sure, why. That's definitely something to have a conversation about. But the career, white collar versus blue collar, tended to have an impact. If you look at social, the gender had an impact. And was Matt, do you remember, was 0 male and 1 was female, or was it the other way around?
I think so.
Okay, I want to say it was a positive relationship, which means males will be more likely to be driven to give. So gender came out as positive and relationship came out as positive. And then enduring elites. Now, I thought that was interesting that household income showed up here. So maybe because these people are so committed, household income does have an impact on the amount that they're giving. I'm committed and I'm going to give to y'all, but I only make this, or I make $1 million a year. Wouldn't that be great? And I'm going to give that. So N size is only 21 on those, but still, I think it gives us enough to work with. So these are the big picture. Does this make sense? Are y'all just making sense? Okay, cool. Some of the takeaways, demographics didn't really matter as much as we expected, although it could be partially because of our data accuracy, and because they're not that different. If we had a lot of differences in the sample that we had, then it probably would have been different. The second big takeaway is the amount given and the amount as a proportion of income typically tended to converge, which again, I thought that was really interesting that the proportion didn't seem to make that big of a difference on what drove their decision-making. Number 3, frequency of giving. No matter how you sliced it, the number of donations, the frequency that they donated seemed to matter no matter what, right? And so again, more frequent donations, even if they're in smaller amounts, tended to produce better results. And then lastly, the masses tend to want or need events in order to stimulate giving. Like maybe they haven't heard of you, but they go to this event, they see what you're doing, they hear your story, and they're like, okay, I get this. So that seems to be their driver more than anything else. Recommendations we're going to cover with the client. So I'm going to invite the panel to come up here and take a few questions about that portion before we go into the panel discussion. What questions do y'all have? Yes, sir.
One thing that jumped out in giving, and you laid out, you know, bank account, et cetera, is it kind of related in my own situation, is that I give to Compassion International, and that's done off on American Express. So I didn't see credit card out there unless it's clustered or embedded with the ACH or the checking account.
Is credit card a thing?
Yes, it's definitely a thing, right, Rand? But it comes through what you saw were different technology providers that may give us like peer-to-peer fundraising sites, and then they also process the credit card there as well. So it would have been just embedded in a couple of those different circles that were on that slide.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just, you know, intuitively thinking, you know, that's something that, you know, somebody plays on it, and you do that,
yeah.
And then the whole retention thing and some of the points you're making.
I should have shown an iceberg too, because what this did was tease the heck out of us. I mean, we're like, gosh, if we had this, if we had this, if we had this. So yeah, this is definitely tip of the iceberg. Good point.
If we had more time.
And more time, yeah. What other questions? Yeah.
I have a question. I believe it's for Mr. Haynes. Am I correct? You mentioned earlier geocoding the addresses and implementing those in phase 2. Am I on the wrong track?
Yep, no, you're
okay.
Dead on. You're dead on.
Yeah. I'm curious to hear how you guys plan on implementing them and at what level, like you guys are breaking them down. So are you doing state? Are you doing city? Are you doing county?
So all this analysis was done at the zip code level, and the geocoding was at the block group level. But that exploded the data sets and added a whole lot more to it, and we were sort of running out of time. So we stayed at the zip code level for this analysis. I think where we take it from here will be depending upon where Enduring Hearts wants to go with phase 2.
And we do want to have a Q4 project, so we are now accepting volunteers. Good. Okay, one more question. Yeah.
When you're looking at drivers, how did you figure out like correlation versus causation? So, for example, one of the big drivers is bank draft.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that that's just highly correlated with the big donation, or are we going to go out and try to, like, you know, have a bank draft?
I think it's the mode of bank draft, yeah. And there's no causation in any of this. I mean, we'd have to design an experiment, you know, to really ascertain causation. So yeah, it's more of a relationship. We don't know if having the bank draft makes it easier and therefore, quote, causes, or if it's the other way. I mean, who knows? But that's our implication, is that it has something to do with it. You know, that's why
I can speak to that later.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to write a big check, and either I want points on my Amex card, or I don't want to pay the charges through PayPal or something.
Or the charity says the cheapest way to give to us so that we pay the least amount as I take from my day job and apply it to this is please put us on your ACH draft. Yeah. That is the cheapest way to accept the payment. All other providers come at a cost.
Oh, okay. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to let each panelist introduce themselves and give a little bit of background. Frank Borovsky, unfortunately, is unable to be here in person, but I think he's listening in online. He is vice president at Salesforce, which y'all know they own Tableau as well. I've known Frank for a while. He was at Club Car, he was at Honeywell, and now he's at Salesforce, and he's been an amazing colleague. And I think he's pretty much shown up to every single meeting. This group meets like twice a week, y'all, for an hour each time. So they've been doing that for like 12 weeks. At this point, they're like brother and sister over here. So, but sorry, Frank, you couldn't make it. Shout out to you. All right, Matt.
Matt Haynes, I'm mostly a healthcare IT process improvement and analytics guy, doing lots of work for DaVita Medical Group, Walmart Health, recently did the project over in Dallas, Georgia, and a bunch of other healthcare related providers.
My name is Jess Ramos. My background is in math and Spanish, and I've been in the fintech world doing analytics the last few years and hoping to pursue data science in the near future.
Josh Buzhardt. I work for a not-for-profit student loan lender, South Carolina Student Loan. I'm one of the only ones up here, I think, that isn't from Atlanta. So right out of the gate, this is all a very new experience for me. It's nice to meet y'all. We're a little bit different. We're a not-for-profit, so this kind of has a little bit of crossover for me. I'm, by the way, the Director of Business Intelligence there. I've been working there for about 15 years. What we try to do is lower the overall cost of education by helping students find good sources of financial aid, make good borrowing decisions. So it is a not-for-profit, but it's not in the same mold as something like Enduring Hearts. So it was very eye-opening for me to kind of see that world and be a part of it and learn from these guys.
I'm Karen Patel. I have a finance background, and I'm kind of like just now starting to get into like data science. This project, it kind of helped me get a lot of like hands-on experience in data, working with large data sets. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. All right, so we have 3 questions for this panel. The first question, and y'all don't have to answer in order, you're cracking me up. What was it like working on a volunteer-based data science project for a nonprofit? There are a couple of things to call out there. Volunteer-based. And if y'all have ever worked with a volunteer basis, it's very different than a day job that's paying you. And also working for a nonprofit is also very different. So can y'all, any one of y'all, you can just jump in, explain a little bit about that?
I'll let Jess do that.
Yeah, I think it was just kind of different because it was for a nonprofit. I think there was just a really big meaning behind this project. I mean, most of us do analytics and data science all day for our day jobs, and then we get off work and we're like, oh, we have more analytics work to do. Great. But I think just the fact that it has a bigger purpose, I think that part is really exciting, knowing that we're going to make a big difference in an organization that could really use our skill sets. So that for me was really rewarding. And this group was just great to work with, very flexible. So it was really easy to balance with other, jobs and volunteer projects as well.
And Jess took a job like during all this. I mean, so all these people are superstars. I know they kind of introduce themselves very modestly, but she took a job while doing this project and she stayed on the project. She could have easily said, I just started a new job, I can't continue, but she kept going.
Dedicated.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to add, again, coming from, 15 years of working for a smallish kind of not-for-profit, I understood the data challenge. I understand the data challenges of having limited data and limited resources to work through it. What really struck me right out of the gate working on this project was just how this team was able to take, a very large amount of data and turn that into something that Beverly and Jess could work for. And I think that really speaks to why organizations like Enduring Hearts need this kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My answer is real simple and sweet. It felt good to work on the project, and it was great working with the Enduring Hearts team. It's just enjoyed doing it.
My answer is kind of like Matt's, but it was good to get like this hands-on experience, and it's going towards like a really good cause. Like Ruth said, the average art's only lasts 12, 11 years. And that needs to change. And helping fund an initiative and building a predictive model that help work towards that is kind of important.
Yeah, man. You can, grow your resume, get hands-on experience while helping somebody. Anyway, I'm glad y'all had a great time because I felt guilty the whole time. I did. I felt guilty. So we're sort of given a rosy view of this, but the reality is there were a ton of challenges this group had to overcome. So can you guys walk us through one or two of those? What were some of the bigger challenges and how did you overcome them?
Kind of like the longest life right here.
Yeah. So it took up a whole lot more time than I ever expected. Way more.
Yeah.
And the other challenge was everybody changed. Almost everybody on this volunteer team changed jobs sometime during it. So, and in their jobs, they are super busy. So it was challenging at best, just because of the demands on everybody. I think you were the one who said, having come home and realize you're having a data science project to do is like, oh, okay, there is 2 more hours. My wife's not going to see me. It's like, honey, are you coming upstairs to come for dinner? I'm kind of hungry now.
I'd say one of the challenges was messy data. I think that goes with any data science project, but I think just working with different data is always valuable, getting used to different types of data sets, tracking different metrics. That's always really good hands-on experience. And I think for me, one of the challenges was learning how to develop personas. That's something that was new to me. And that's one reason I'm really thankful for this project, is because I got to expand my skill set and do a different type of data science work than I get to for my day job.
Yeah, you did a great job.
And she did great.
Yeah, I was, as far as how we overcome challenges, I was just going to say persistence. I mean, we kind of kept at it. You know, we kept having our calls, we kept talking about the data, and then we finally found that spot where everybody kind of came together and had the time to work on it and kind of push it across the finish line. So persistence was a big part of overcoming that challenge.
Yeah. Matt kind of alluded to it. I know like the very first step, like the exploratory step, we were on that far for like, it felt like months. We couldn't get like all the data scientists to like come together. And there was a lot of people that helped with that. Like I know Hal and Keita and Jamal, they all helped, did their part in that, but fortunately they're not here. I think whenever everyone kind of got settled and like we kind of had like the core group of like 5 or 6 that were meeting like every single session, I think that's when like the ball really started to roll.
Exactly. Yeah. What lastly, what advice would you guys have? Like, I mean, Karen, I'm sorry to point at you in particular, but he's never done anything like this. And so I was really impressed with his bravery, because there are a lot of us that want to do something like this using data science for good, but they don't quite know how. And he just jumped in. I still don't know quite how he did that. So I'm not pointing you out or anything, but what if somebody does want to really get involved and help by using their professional superpowers? What would you guys recommend? What advice would you give after been through it?
I think you just gotta jump into the pool, right? I know it sounds kind of cliche, but there was a lot of like time where I spent like learning like new skills. Like I had a very like basic understanding of like how to use some of these tools. But as we started working on this project, I kind of just started like growing my skill set and really started to like move towards it. So I know I will say this, I met her playing pickleball and I knew I wanted to change into like a data role. And I don't know, she was just like, you know, this is a volunteer team. You can come in and you can help. And that's what I did.
Yeah, I was just going to add, you know, if you're thinking about doing something like this, be there as much as you possibly can. And, you know, don't let a perceived lack of skill in any particular area stop you from jumping in, being there and listening and looking for a chance to contribute. And again, it is hard, you know, if you're out there and you're not working for a company in that role to get your hands on a real life data set like this. So it really is a good chance for those that are a little less experienced to jump in and learn a lot of things.
Yeah, my advice is also to jump in. I think it's normal to have imposter syndrome, especially when you're doing something new or working with different types of data. But you really do just have to jump in. And this group was super supportive. And it's just an honor to be able to work with people like this from all different backgrounds, different industries, different companies. So I think the networking experience to get to work with people who were further along in their careers than I am was just invaluable and a super good experience.
Nice.
And I've already alluded to my answer. This is going to take up way more time than you ever expected.
Yes, it will.
Wait a little while until things calm down.
It can be very taxing. So the commitment, I mean, just hand them applause, please, y'all. The commitment. Let's take some questions for the panel. And please, I mean, except for Matt, because Matt was the only one responsible for data engineering, but if you could just ask the general panel without pointing anybody out in particular. But what questions do you have? And I think online, again, it's 404-423-8848. 8848. If y'all want to text questions, 404-423-8848. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I forgot your name. What's your name?
Ed Wallace.
Okay,
Verizon.
Ed, yes.
The three segments. The two segments, you know, just looking at the data real quick, it was like, is there a difference? And was the difference the frequency?
So the segments,
cutting to the chase with the
the segments were developed using Euclidean distance formulations, and so there's definitely a difference. Now, one of my questions for Jess was, how do you move someone from one segment to the next? Because there's this one guy that's like, oh, if we could just move this, this, and this, and that was the purpose of the driver analysis. Because if we know how that segment thinks and what makes them tick, we can try to move them because we want to push them all to enduring elites as much as possible. But did you have a response for his question?
Yeah, so I will say that was also my question while developing the personas. It was really hard to tease out those differences because at the surface level, they do look very similar. But what I found to be the biggest differences is that the enduring elites, they donated more annually. So their average annual amount was, the frequency and the average amount was also higher as well. And then the enduring elites, none of them were first or only time donors. And then the dedicated donors, the middle group, they had more people that just donated once and then kind of disappeared.
Yeah. And another thing I'll point out just real quick is that if there had not really been that big of a difference, you would not have seen a difference in their explanatory models either. Yeah, so they were definitely different, but it was nuanced. You had to really kind of tease it out. Yes, sir.
I've noticed on the Enduring Hearts website that there are, a number of different ways people can contribute. The road to recovery, the scientific research around it. Did you guys have an opportunity to think about whether, that aspect of the contribution of the donation differed in any respect with the analysis that you were doing?
I don't know if y'all thought about this, but after the fact, I thought we should have looked at other ways that they were engaged. Like there's got to be like an engagement score or something like that drove some of the donations. From the academic literature that we reviewed, there were drivers, there were activities, and then money came after that. And so we didn't really explore that middle section as much as we wanted to. Plus we were limited by time and data. Did you guys have a comment?
I mean, the two of the segments shown are very similar. One of them is very different than the other two, in that it's more your online giving, your smaller donations, one-time, first-time donors. And the other two were more driven through bank accounts, events, and that kind of thing. So I think, one of the recommendations I guess we pulled out, but that we were at least thought about was, targeting what Frank would say if he was here was the, total acquirable market of that last group where there's, they're coming in through Facebook to the website. So there's a lot of room to grow there.
I have to tell you though, it took us, Shannon, you may remember this too. It took weeks. Do y'all remember going back and forth on the business problem, Shannon Shiv? I mean, it took us weeks just to get down to a business question and we said, okay, we're going to stop here. So that was one of the challenges we have is the curiosity, which is a good thing, can also lead you down a bunch of different paths. So we had to just cut it at one point. Great question. Really good curiosity. You should join our team. Yeah.
I do have to say a lot of the data, we do get a lot like on National Giving Tuesday and certain like fundraisers and stuff from Facebook. And Facebook gives you no details except your first name and last name. And sometimes the first name could be Scooby and the last name could be Do, because that's what their Facebook name is. Yeah. And literally, like Matt's like, and we're like, they're coming from, your birthday fundraiser, and they donate once, but, maybe they'll donate $5 or $500, but we don't have that opportunity to follow up and thank them unless they've already given a different way, right, and they're in our system. But that's, a lot of our, a good part of our data, we don't have anything but names.
So we probably should have brought this up a little earlier. There of the donors, it's donors that we could sort of tag back this some zip code level because they were not anonymous. 60%, 50-60% of all the donors are anonymous, or we don't have an address on them, which means I really can't tie you back to anything concrete enough to create the persona. So anyway.
Yeah. And the double-edged sword of the payment comes back. Facebook will process for free a credit card.
Right.
But they'll keep your data.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yvonne and then Nick.
So question, when you were presenting conclusions and how was that, how was the the process of presenting here. Here's what we got, you know.
This is the first time we've done it.
Was it
Actually.
easy, difficult?
Easy so far.
Yeah. No, we had a preliminary. I will say from the preliminary meeting that we had, I think you very much influenced our leader and our head of development, and that they're digging into certain things. We kind of gut level thought, as I mentioned, we looked like a startup. A private equity guy started us. The funding came just from within that social network, and just like startups start to get funding from different places, we're starting to see that as well. But it is very homogenous back to our founder who started it. So we knew we needed to branch out, but the clustering and the drivers help us understand how to go about it on the social side, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then this is the first time they've seen the driver analysis. They've seen the cluster preliminary.
It's
and
very cool.
We're hoping to have a third meeting with them to go over more details. So we're hoping to get lots of replies. Let me get Nick, 2 online, and then you guys. Yeah, Nick.
So, you know, I wonder if you had more data, you could have been more targeted, but then you become like all the other advertisers, like, you know, you raise a lot of privacy concerns. So it's a double-edged sword, like whether you want to improve your efficiency, because I believe that the whole point of this project is how we can raise the, you know, donation. I actually call them revenues. I don't know if we could see a little bit the bigger picture and like if we had, for example, purchase data from people, all these people, could we find places where we could have recommended a donation, or we could have gone to this, you know, particular vendors and say, hey, people who buy from you, they tend to donate. So why don't you make it, you know, in the checkout, you want to add $2? I mean, some stores already do that, round up and all that stuff.
I think that's one. And there's also an employer donation. There's actually 2 employer donation sites that we're plugged into. We're plugged into. I know when I was on the phone with Ray, or maybe I came to the office one time, it's like, Ray, show me your process. Oh, look, here's a $10,000 donation. All it says is ICE. What is this? And I just happen to go, oh, that must be Intercontinental Exchange. Somebody donated $10,000 anonymously through the employer deduction benefits program. And then Ray had to go try to track it down. It's like, no, all we can do is figure out it came from this company. That's as good as it got. But that's a pretty substantial donation.
Yeah, this is definitely step one of what we see is could be a very long project to figure out their donations. Shannon?
We have 2 questions from the online room. The first one is from one of the attendees that says, I have a question. How can I be part of a heart transplant research as a university student? I didn't know if Enduring Heart had some partnerships they wanted to talk about.
So we do accept, you know, grant proposals, you know, funding from major universities who have medical research. But I don't think, other than there's one nonprofit down in Birmingham that really holds all the data for all the children's hospitals. And so I think if that person could reach out to me, we can probably get them connected.
Perfect. We'll get you guys connected. And then the second question was how they could join the organization and volunteer more for Tax for Good.
Yep, I'm going to cover that in a while.
Perfect.
Happy to cover that. By the way, Perrin Pickleball, Josh was on my executive council at the Analytics Center, University of South Carolina. Jess, I think I first met you at Berry through Dr. White, Tama White, and then she has been in my orbit. She went to do this thing in Athens for me, thank God. She's been wonderful. And Matt, I don't know where you came from, man. But he's been showing up. Incredible leader. And Shannon and Shiv and I've been, you know, the ones to kind of choose the sort of, in this case, not to mean this negative, it's very positive, the motley crew that we have. So they've been a wonderful group. Oh, Southern, yeah, SCSC, definitely. Okay, let's see. And you had one more question? Or was that the 2? Okay, and then we have one right here and then right here. Yeah.
Sure. So I had, since we've already spoken about geolocation data earlier, I had a question. Given the phase 2 plans that you guys have, how does the geolocation potentially help? Is it directed towards how certain locations donate more or less, or how what kind of correlation they have to the the headquarters of Enduring Hearts?
I'm hoping it improves the accuracy because suddenly we'll drop down from a zip code down to block groups and 400 to 600 households. So it'll be much more of birds of a feather flock together, and we can maybe rerun this and see if it produces anything different.
Yeah, even the household, am I wrong? Household income was a proxy based on zip.
Yes.
It wasn't their real household income. We didn't have that number. But if we had stuff like that, man, the granularity we could get out of it would be great. Yes, ma'am.
What are your thoughts for phase 2?
Yeah. We do have
thoughts for phase 2.
We do. So the question for those of y'all online who can't hear it, it was, what are the thoughts on phase 2? We're actually still trying to hammer that out. We've had a couple of conversations about, do we go deeper with what we've done? Do we expand what we've done? Do we do something completely different? And some of the completely different stuff would be in a data assessment. That's one of the things that we had talked about. I don't know if you guys had thoughts. We're still figuring that out. If you want to, what do you think would be the most useful is a question that we need to have with the Enduring Hearts team. Do you have a recommendation?
I was just curious how your brainstorm. You don't have to decide today.
Oh, well, those are some of the top.
Several things about the presentation.
Yeah, those are some of the top things. Is how do we do kind of don't be scared when I say this, but kind of take what we already did and do it again, but with better data, more data, that sort of thing. That's one thing. Or we could accept what we have and expand on it, or we could do something totally different because we did notice y'all are perfect in every way, that their data may need some assessing and that they could really benefit from a parking lot of variables. Like here, if you can collect this, this, and this, you'll have a lot more power.
I think age.
There's also marketing person on board now too.
Yep.
Yeah, and now there's marketing.
Just started recently, so we're thankful for that. No, I think there's a lot of opportunity, but there's a lot to glean and actions to take just from this first assessment. We're less than 10 people. We're currently at about a $2.1 million budget a year with a 5-year plan to grow us very rapidly. So I think in order to do that and keep that 501c3 rating, we've got to make sure that we're addressing the public at large, right? And not just major donors.
Yep. Yep. Awesome. Hey, give a hand to our panel. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask, Shiv's been back there taking mental notes on all this, and I'm going to ask Shiv to come on up. He's one of our board members. He's a senior director of data science at HD Supply, and has also been instrumental in the strategy and getting this For Good initiative going. So I'm going to ask him to give us a few of his words of wisdom and observations from what he's seen today, and then we'll close with how to get involved.
Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, the volunteers, for the great work. I got roped in by Beverly about a year ago to do this work with her. And it's been quite a journey, especially coming out of COVID and starting to do this work. But I want to say a couple of things. I want to thank TAG for giving us the platform to build upon, set up this thing called TAG Data Science for Good. It allows us to really branch out and use the skills we have in a manner that typically we don't get an opportunity to do. Because usually what happens is you go and you, for instance, I go and I love to box food at the Atlanta Food Bank. That's how I give. But giving in this manner is something different and very special to be able to do. As we start this journey, the first thing I realized about it was it's really scrappy. And you've got to have this mental fortitude that you don't have all the tools, you don't have all the data. You can't necessarily turn around and say, hey, are you going to get this done by tomorrow? You've got to just be flexible, and you've just got to be part of a team that is going to be scrappy to get something done. And that scrappiness and that willingness allows you to see what you saw today, right? Because this is all just folks, like Beverly said, twice a week, looking at the data, not knowing what's there, trying to find better ways to do it, but then delivering this. The other thing, so the volunteers are key here, and finding them, for them to sign up to do this work. Some of them don't necessarily know what the the nonprofit is, but they're willing to jump in and do the work. So thank you for all the volunteers who are here, those that continue to want to sign up, and those that will show up in the future. The other is the nonprofits, right? They don't know us. They have this data, but they want to keep moving and use this data science thing called data science to help them get better at what they do. And there's a lot to be said, the trust they place in us to do this work. So we thank you for allowing us to do this work in the way we do. And then lastly, it's Beverly and her extent team that keeps going out and reaching out to people to create these orbits that allow us to continue this work. And, you know, throughout this process, what I've learned is that there's a lot of need for this. There are a lot of folks who want to do it. Our journey is about how do we create a sustainable way to do it so that it becomes easier for us to build from a nonprofit side, be able to solicit nonprofits to want to work with us. And then from our side, find the right set of tools and volunteers to be able to do this at scale. And this is journey. This is step 1 and 2. We had in March a hackathon, which was fabulous. So this is 2, and hopefully next year we can do 4, if not 8. But that's the journey. And so thank you all, volunteers, nonprofits, for helping us do this.
Perfect. Thank you. Awesome. I know I can count on you, Shiv. Scrappy journey. Now remember, you said scrappy, not the other word. There's an S in front of it. So yes, it was definitely a scrappy journey. Tag Data Science and Analytics for Good initiative. We need you. We need your help. We can't do it without you. Our Q4 project is TBD, to your point. We're going to do something, but we haven't quite figured out what that phase 2 is. We're going to do something. 2023, we're either going to work with the Rome Floyd County Commission on Children and Youth or the National Center for Housing and Child Welfare if we get TAG's approval. And so those are both dealing with homelessness for youth that are coming out of foster care. That's 3 really impressive causes. I don't know if y'all know this, but kids that age out of foster care, a large percentage of them go homeless. And y'all, I have a heart for veterans, but foster kids have 2x the PTS as a veteran. That's not me saying it. That's like statistically, you can go look that up. So very scary situation. Those 2 organizations are very friendly. I've done work with them in the past. We're hoping to do a hackathon with a partner, a tag partner, the pilot company in March. So lots of great ideas coming up, but we need volunteers. We have a strong preference for you being a tag member. If you're not a tag member, or if your company is not a tag member, please ask Jessica to sign you up, or to like, what do I need to do to become a tag member? How do I get my company to become a tag member? Find out how to become a tag member. We really want our volunteers to be tag members if at all possible. Some of the roles that we're recruiting for right now: data engineers, analysts, data scientists, project managers, and drum roll please, leadership. One of the things that we discussed as a team at the end of all this sort of postmortem in a way was, what was missing? What can we do next time? How do we make this better? We need a solid data science leader that can just direct the path, right? And so I've tapped a couple people. There's one guy in particular who is retired. He's like really known in the field, and he's awesome. And I'm hoping that he will help us, not to point anybody out. But anyway, so lots of different roles that we can do. And then lastly, there's a meetup group. There are a couple different ways you can sign up, but the easiest way is just go to the meetup. The meetup is called Tag Data Science and Analytics for Good Initiative. You go to Tag Data Science and Analytics for Good Initiative and sign up on that meetup. That gives me the ability to like email y'all very quickly and let you know about things like this, and let you know about our next projects that are coming up. What else? I think that is all I was going to say. We try to focus on human-based vulnerable populations, opioid addiction, homelessness, foster, what else? Human trafficking. Y'all, don't even get me started. Human trafficking is a big issue, especially in Atlanta. A lot of people don't even really understand what it is. It took me a while to really understand what it was. But those are the kinds of issues that we want to try to address leveraging data science. So that's what we're all about at TAG Data Science Analytics for a Good Initiative. Thank you guys so much for coming today. Please feel free to stay and mingle for a little while before we get kicked out. But thank you again.